Well, the 2022 season promised to be the start of a new era for the Baltimore Orioles as we finally start to see some of the top prospects in the system make their way up to Camden Yards, and that starts tonight with Kyle Bradish as he gets the call to make his Major League debut against the Boston Red Sox. Hi, everyone. Welcome into MASN All Access. I'm Brendan Mortensen, soon to be joined by MASN Orioles insider Roch Kubatko. We're going to break down the big news of the day. Orioles 10th-ranked prospect Kyle Bradish getting the call to the bigs. Fans have been clamoring for it, and he is finally here. Bradish, the 25-year-old righty, is a former fourth-round pick out of New Mexico State, and he has been absolutely lighting it up at AAA so far. Fans have been asking for him, and he is finally here. He's got a 1.20 ERA in AAA so far this season, and of course, he was the centerpiece of that Dylan Bundy trade that sent Bundy over to the Angels. Now, Kyle Bradish was decent last year at AAA, but he wasn't really the same pitcher that we've seen so far this season. As you look at his stats over the last 2 years, in 24 games, he had a record of 7-5, a 3.81 ERA, which is pretty good, but wasn't the same kind of pitcher we're getting right now, with 122 strikeouts and a whip of just over 1.3. But his stats for this year, he's looked like a completely new man in just 3 starts. Obviously, a pretty small sample size at AAA Norfolk so far, but in 15 innings has an ERA of just 1.2 with 17 strikeouts and a whip just over 0.7. And he's been putting up pretty comparable numbers to the Orioles' top pitching prospect in their entire system, Grayson Rodriguez. Those guys have pretty much been battling out for the top stats at AAA Norfolk so far. We want to hear your thoughts on Kyle Bradish's promotion to the big leagues. Make sure you're commenting along on Facebook and YouTube as Kyle Bradish will make his Major League debut tonight against the Red Sox. And like I said, it's been a small sample size so far for Kyle Bradish at AAA Norfolk, but his numbers last year improved down the stretch. In his last 6 starts at AAA last season, had a 2.57 ERA, a 2.18 batting average against, with 33 strikeouts and just 6 walks. And if you remember back to spring training, he looked really solid in a few outings, to the point where some fans were wondering if Bradish would even break camp with the team. That didn't appear to be the blueprint as he gets the call now. But Bradish showed enough against some tough lineups in spring training to inspire some confidence that he would be getting the call up to the majors pretty soon. And Bradish will join a rotation that's actually been pitching surprisingly well so far. Jordan Lyles with kind of a rough outing against the Yankees, inflating that ERA a bit to 5.40. But Bruce Zimmerman, we have talked about him a ton so far. He has looked spectacular. An ERA under 1 with a 1-1 record. Tyler Wells, we know what kind of pitcher he can be. He's still adjusting to being a starter at the big league level a little bit with a 5.54 ERA. He's looked better over his last few starts, and you see Kyle Bradish's numbers fitting right in with a 2-0 record at AAA and a 1.20 ERA. And Spencer Watkins, we've thrown him in now as the number 5 starter in the rotation, and he's earned his spot so far with a 2.77 ERA to start the 2022 season. Now, what kind of impact will Kyle Bradish have this year? What can we expect from him tonight? I caught up with MASN Orioles insider Roch Kubatko to break this move down. We're joined now on MASN All Access by MASN Orioles insider Roch Kubatko. And Roch, let's jump right into it. Fans have been clamoring to see Kyle Bradish at the majors, and he finally makes his debut tonight against the Red Sox. What should we expect to see out of the young righty?
Have they been claiming? I hadn't even noticed that. I didn't think fans even cared whether Kyle Bradish came here. But yeah, I mean, they give the people what they want. Clearly, though, the Orioles feel like he's ready, or this wouldn't be happening. We will have to check on what kind of length we can expect. And they've been careful with him with his innings. That's why he stayed back and extended spring training briefly before moving back up to AAA. They're giving him some extra rest. He was due to pitch on Wednesday and got pushed to tonight for Norfolk, allegedly. Now it ends up being in Baltimore, but that gives him 2 extra days because he had been working on the normal 4 days rest between the 3 starts that he's made. So, maybe that helps a little bit, but I still think because they're being careful with those innings, maybe kind of a Tyler Wells type situation where, hey, if we can get 5 out of him, that'd be fantastic. And then hopefully have some length behind him. Keegan Aiken, for example, what they go tandem or whatever they do. I don't think they're going to try and push him too far. He is stretched out to the point where it felt like it was time for him to come up. And most importantly, of course, he was pitching very, very well, which he's been doing since day one in camp. That really convinced him to make this move.
Now, you mentioned spring training. He looked really, really solid in his outings there. From what you saw, did you think he was close to being in the starting rotation at the big leagues at that point?
I did. So close that in the back of my mind, I started thinking, and I'm sure I'm not the only one on the beat, would he actually break camp with them? Because they did have the opening. And I thought, there was no way going into camp that this was going to happen. I was telling people, they're not going to have to make that jump, even though he did have, ample AAA starts last year. I thought he was not a candidate to break camp. And then he looked so good. And he had those 2 scoreless outings, 2-inning scoreless outings against the Phillies and the Yankees on the road against their A lineups. And it's like, well, maybe now. He may be working himself in. And then, of course, when he was optioned, I know some people were disappointed that it made sense again. It's like if you've been paying attention to the plan, he was not going to be a guy who was going to make that jump. They wanted to get a little more time. It extended, built up a few more innings in AAA, but he looked really good and extremely confident without being cocky. I mean, we talked to him outside the clubhouse in Tampa after that Yankee game, and it was a night game, and there was a big crowd there, and I was just trying to get him to talk about the experience, what that meant to him and what it was like. And he was like, I need a game like this because I'm going to be seeing them in our division. I'm going to be facing them, so it was a good experience. He was already thinking ahead to the regular season, say against the Red Sox tonight, but nonetheless, he's not scared. He wasn't intimidated at all by it, and he's got this mature approach. I'm going to be facing division opponents, so I should be pitching against them now. He knew that this was his destiny. It was going to happen. It was a matter of when, not if. And here he is.
Now, Roch, you mentioned the plan. Mike Elias always seems to have a plan with these prospects. Obviously, the injuries to John Means and now Chris Ellis have thrown a wrinkle into the Orioles starting rotation. But do you think Bradish gets this promotion regardless of those injuries?
I think so. I do know that if they didn't think he was ready or they weren't really sure about it at this point, they wouldn't bring him up just because there was a need, because they haven't done that with any of the prospects, really. So, they had to feel good about where he was at this point, but of course it helps that there was that opening. Now, if John Means doesn't have Tommy John and the rotation's going really, really well, maybe you go ahead and keep him down for another start and I'll try and force him in there. But there was that need, and because they felt like, okay, he is ready to do this, they bring him up. He was really dictating when the time was right, when way he was pitching and how he was stretched out. And they really don't. I know it happens. It's happened to Lowther and Alexander Wells and some other guys where you get called up, you're on the shuttle, you go back, you come back again. We just saw Wells on the taxi squad, and then he was recalled. They really don't want to do that with him. They're really hoping that once he's up, he's ready to stay. The same as Rodriguez, the same as D.L. Hall eventually, all these guys. They don't want Kyle Bradish riding the shuttle, and that's why they weren't going to go ahead and break camp with him or bring up after one good start in AAA and say, well, let's see how it goes, and if it doesn't, we'll option him. They really don't want to do that to him. So they must feel pretty good about where he is right now. I really don't think he would be here even with that need, but that certainly did help.
Now, we saw Bradish in about 20 games or so last season with AAA Norfolk and was not putting up these kinds of gaudy numbers. Was there anything to you that jumped out about Bradish in spring training that made you think, okay, this might be a different pitcher we're seeing this year?
Yeah, he was throwing strikes. That was one of the big things when you look at the numbers on the search and say, why isn't he up now? And, he's 25, and I think he's got like 24 AAA appearances. But one of the reasons, besides building those innings again, was the fact that, his walk rate was high. And you really don't want to bring a guy to the majors because normally, as history has shown us, that doesn't go down in the majors. If you're walking too many guys in AA and AAA, it's not going to get any better in the big leagues where the guys really know the strike zone, have a more disciplined plate approach, much tougher at bats. And he's really improved in that. He's very aggressive in the strike zone now, plus fastball, but also the good secondary stuff that he can count on. So the key was just to try and cut down those walks. And, that would be his undoing probably. If anything doesn't go right when he's up here now, it might be that again. If he starts having trouble throwing strikes, falling behind, walking too many guys, littering the bases, that would be the problem. If he can avoid doing that, he's got the stuff. Again, he's got the confidence and he's got the experience. I've heard people say, why not Grayson Rodriguez? He's younger. I think he's made 3 AAA starts. His time is coming. The order was Bradish, Rodriguez, Hall, ideally. That's when they're going to arrive, staggered like that in that order. This is the first guy. Of course, Hall's going to be in Aberdeen tonight on his development list progression. And then, of course, fans can choose where they want to go tonight.
Now, you mentioned Grayson Rodriguez and DL Hall. Those are the two other big pitching prospects in the Orioles system that we might see at some point this year. How far behind in the timeline do you think those guys are?
A lot of it's going to depend on the size, health, performance. So I think, I don't know how many exactly starts they want to give, let's say, Grayson Rodriguez. Probably doesn't need as many as Bradish. I don't think they're going to say, look, we got to get him, 24 games under his belt, that level. But maybe it's a month, maybe it's 2 months, depending how he's pitching. With Hall, they're really being careful. I know that people are eager to see him, especially after that dominant inning he threw in Clearwater, where he's hitting 100, he's striking out 2 guys, retiring the side in order. But he only made 7 starts last year in Double-A. He had stress reaction to his elbow. So they're being very careful. They kept him extended longer. They're putting him now Aberdeen. He's going to work his way up. Eventually to Bowie, and then I would think the Norfolk. So he's going to be a little ways down the road. He could move quickly, but it's going to be a little ways. I wouldn't leave a candle burning in the window quite yet. Rodriguez, really, it's going to be interesting to see if he puts together a few more really dominant outings. I know the temptation is going to be there, and then it's going to be a question of how much is he stretched out and how many starts do they want to give him down there. But, I don't know if it's going to be months and months, though, with this guy. I feel like that his stuff is so good, and if he's really dominant. Remember his last outing, he was not as strong. It was against a really good lineup that he was facing. But if he really goes on a tear here, we'll see him sooner rather than later. But I don't know if there's really a set total of innings or starts or anything. But his performance will dictate a lot of that. They'll make room. Let me tell you that. They will make room when they know he's ready.
Have to make room for some of those top pitching prospects. And given Bradish's pedigree as the 10th overall prospect in the Orioles system, is it safe to pencil him in every 5 days for the long haul, or could he be back and forth? What do you think the plan is for Bradish?
I mean, again, they're really hoping they don't have to shuttle him. I think if he's pitching really well and he earns the right to stay here, he'll stay here. And maybe they'll try and find that rest for him whenever there's a chance on an off day to push him back. They would do that. But otherwise, I think it'd be every 5 days. And it's just a question of how many innings per start. Like with Tyler Wells, Brandon Hyde said that this outing in New York, when it was 5 innings, 72 pitches, that was probably about where you're going to cap him off. They're not going to push him beyond that because he didn't pitch for 2 years. And then he was a Rule 5 high leverage reliever last year. And they don't want to have to shut him down. They want him to be able to pitch through the summer. That's why you limit his innings this year. You can turn him loose next year. Bradish could be something similar despite different circumstances, or maybe they're going to say, okay, we're going to get him up to a certain point, but we're not going to push him too far because we don't want his innings to build to the point where we can't use him for the rest of the season. And he's stretched out enough where, you can get these into 80 pitch range now, so I think they can go a little farther with him. They're going to be careful with those innings for that same reason, because, it's his first time in the majors. They don't want to shut him down later, so you could see some more situations where you have somebody ready behind him that maybe can provide some length. But of course, keep in mind the rushes go down to 26 on May 2nd. You carry 14 pitchers at least, not 13, but they're not going to be able to carry as many guys. But anyway, with Bradish, they are going to be careful with the innings, but you don't have to baby him too much because, again, he's stretched out pretty well right now.
Kyle Bradish making his debut tonight against the Red Sox, and MASN Orioles insider Roch Kubatko will have you covered through it all. Roch, thanks so much for your time.
All right, thank you.
Well, thanks again to Roch Kubatko for his time, and thank you for commenting along on YouTube and Facebook. Daniel on YouTube saying Kyle Bradish, Orioles Hall of Fame lock. So a little bit of lofty expectations there from Daniel. And on Facebook, some questions about how long into a game Kyle Bradish might go. If you've been going off of his AAA starts, he's been ramping up slowly but surely. His first start, he goes 4 innings. Second start goes 5 innings. And in his most recent start against the Durham Bulls, throws 87 pitches over 6 total innings. You'd have to imagine if you're the Orioles, you'd be thrilled with 5 or 6 quality innings out of Kyle Bradish, especially when your bullpen has been pitching as well as it has. So we'll see how Kyle Bradish will perform tonight in his first career start. Make sure you're tuning in starting at 6:30 on MASN. We'll have you covered for his entire Major League debut. And of course, next week, make sure you're tuning in to the MASN All Access podcast. Paul Mancano and I will be breaking down Bradish's start, what we could expect from him this season, and much, much more. And of course, make sure you're checking out the MASN app and MASNsports.com. We've got the latest stats and scores and Orioles coverage 24/7 on MASNsports.com and the MASN app. Vivek on YouTube commenting, this is just the first big prospect that we will see this year. When might we see Adley Rutschman, Grayson Rodriguez? Only time will tell, but Kyle Bradish, the first big-name Orioles prospect to make his debut in Baltimore, and we'll see him tonight at Camden Yards. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.